Hello, I'm pleased to have Matthew Himelstein as my guest. He's a VP of Product at Wonolo, and he has been serial founders, entrepreneurs in tech world, now in charge of product in a growing company in Silicon Valley. And we are going to share some experiences uh, with SaaS companies, product brains, product strategists. I'm pretty sure this will be a great session. I'm going to start with asking Matthew if you could please introduce yourself and also explain about the company a little bit and the problems that you guys solve.
Sure. Armand, thank you so much for having me today. Very
My
appreciative
pleasure.
of the time. So my name is Matthew Himelstein. I'm currently VP of Product at a company called Wonolo. Wonolo stands for Work Now Locally. We bill it as the Uber for temp staffing. It's the largest platform for blue collar gigs in the United States. Basically, if you need a job in a warehouse, you can just download the app and like go get a gig job, like, putting stuff in boxes or moving things around. And really over the past couple of years during COVID, we've had some pretty good, like strong hyper growth. My background, actually, I started, about like 11 years ago, I got into tech as an entrepreneur. I ended up founding or co-founding three different companies. Um, Ended up being a product leader at several other places. And then right before Wonolo, I was actually an entrepreneur in residence at Eventbrite, where I worked directly with the executive staff in terms of addressing business constraints before stuff happens. I've been at Wonolo a couple of years now, just over 2 years. And during my time, we kind of overhauled product and really kind of focused on aligning product with business growth. We've been pretty successful, and I'm excited to share some tips.
Fantastic. Well, there are many fronts we can start with, but let me just start with this general question. You have been, again, founding companies and now you're in charge of product. If there is a founder who wants to start a SaaS company today, and you would advise him to start from the product side, or then of course you have to start from somewhere, but would you start from the product to find the match with the market, or you would start from, hey, what is the right market, and then I would go and just think about the product afterwards?
Yeah, it's a great question, Armand. I think at the end of the day, if you're really going to start a company, the, the thing that you need to understand is like what problem are you going to solve, and then who is that for, right? And out of that um, exploration into that solution, you will uncover how big the market is and if a product, a software-based solution is the best way to do that. I mean, there's plenty of ways that you could solve problems with like pretty light no-code based solution these days. I mean, literally, there's a whole industry standing up around like no code, but some businesses are essentially run off a spreadsheet, and maybe that's what you need to do for you. I think it gets a little bit more interesting after you've kind of gone through that first phase of problem and kind of validated how big the market opportunity is, and realize that you need a unique um, software-based solution. And then when it comes to SaaS, the thing that classically is the most disruptive is if you're able to break down the overall, what I would call the value chain of a specific category or industry and understand how to eliminate a step. And we've done that in a variety of different ways throughout my career, but also most recently at Wonolo. So like at Wonolo, just to give you insights, one of the things that we do is within the staffing world, you can imagine they need, the people who need temporary staff, they want to like, they need 10 people to move, a bunch of boxes at a warehouse or drive a forklift. And classically, they would like interview those people ahead of time. And then after they'd interview 10 people, they bring in five, and then, maybe three of them they'd have keep around long term. Well, Wonolo, we kind of flip it. So, the thing that we understand the most is that, that the time cost of that interview process is pretty significant. And the only thing that matters in the long term is how you would hold on to those last three. So we can eliminate an entire step in the entire like matching process. And so we make it significantly easier for our customers to be able to onboard temp staff like at scale and work even just short-term jobs. And so by eliminating that step in the value chain process of like interviewing, we made a pretty disruptive business and it helped us become the number one platform for on-demand staffing in the United States.
So one point I would like to mention here is the fact that you along the same line that you mentioned, that really time is the essence. Time is getting more expensive, money is getting more and more, but time is not going to get more and more. Time is just limited, never gets more. It's never get less expensive. So the value prop, if the SaaS company is actually saving time, it's a strong value prop. So in your case, by automation, by maybe changing the process, by any way that you are, for customers, they use the service and they are saving their time.
Yeah, definitely. I think the raw time calculation is definitely like important. But if you think about most most businesses, there's some kind of like funnel somewhere where
Mhm.
you have like a conversion on every single step of the funnel. And just simply by eliminating one step, like two things happen. A, it's faster, right? Obviously, like there's one less step, so it takes less time. But B, your conversion is higher, right? Because since you eliminated a step where you lose people or something in the process, your endpoint conversion is higher. And very specifically for staffing industry, we look at things like the cost to um, find a worker and help them activate by working like that first job, and the activation costs for Wonolo are roughly 10% of kind of like what they are for the industry standard, and that's because we've eliminated so many steps and eliminated so much time. And so, like, very quickly, you can see how disruptive software from a product perspective can have pretty significant, business impact. Like, if you're like any business whatsoever, if you said the raw materials that I'm gonna like grab and like sell to other and resell to other people, if I get it for 10% of the cost that everybody else does, that creates a significant competitive advantage.
Makes perfect sense. And now, when we are talking about SaaS versus purely software in old days,
Hmm.
SaaS has many elements there, right? So you are talking about the data part, you are talking about the collaboration part, and users can come in and add value to the platform and what you are doing. Even sometimes you can just make many of those self-service those actions, so they can actually take some of those actions.
Sure.
And then the data component is there, and of course the technology and automation and software part is there, and all of them combined then adds the value and creates that value that software as a service is now in place.
Yeah.
Uh, and in the business that you have started or you are involved now, how do you see, for example, uh, if you had the choice, how do you see the impact of, for example, data offering the value versus
Yeah.
the collaboration, adds the value with bringing people and collaborating, and versus technology purely and automation just adds the value.
Definitely. It's so interesting you mentioned data because, at a high level, it kind of depends on like what, you're actually like selling, in terms of the platform, and that's kind of got to be paired with, we say SaaS, but like there's also like multiple types of ways to monetize. So SaaS-based platforms, classically, there's performance-based monetization as well as like subscription-based monetization. And, Wonolo, we do both of them,
Mhm.
and data feeds back into our customers' decision, right, at the renewal time on the subscription side, or even the performance marketing aspect, to decide to use us again.
Mhm.
And really, the framework I like to think through is just what we call like growth loops. It's something that's kind of been like pioneered in the product industry for a little while now, but not just thinking about everything in like a funnel, but after the value is created, how do you flow that value through your customer and then back into you as a
Mm,
business to try and like make things stronger? And data is one of them, right?
yeah.
Customer comes, use our service, they post a bunch of jobs, they get, some workers to come in. The workers do the jobs, 7 out of 10 do them well, or all of them do well, or all of them don't do well. How do we service that the results of that back to the customer from a database perspective, so they can make intelligent decisions around, should they continue to use us?
Mm,
And there's definitely some things that you need to think through. The um, the freshness of the data,
mm.
the transparency of the data are really kind of the paramounts of understanding, you know, if the data is going to help you succeed or not. Um, and when I say freshness, I mean how late is the data from like the time it actually happens to the time you're showing it to the end user, your customer. You think about it, everybody will say like, "Oh, it should just be instant." It's like, yeah, well, that's a high cost, right, in terms of engineering standpoint to like really go build like what we would call near real time or sub 7 second, you know, uh, sharing of data. If you think about like the ticker in, for the investment community, you'll see the ticker going along the bottom of like CNN or whatever, and it'll say
Mhm.
like ticker, like, prices are up to 15 minutes delayed,
Sure.
right? And you know what? For that audience, 15 minutes is perfectly fine, right? Because the speed and the freshness of the data are dictated by how fast you can respond to the data.
Mhm.
And so if you can make a decision within 15 minutes of getting that fresh data, then you should aspire to have 15-minute fresh data. But if you're getting data and you can't do anything for a whole nother day, then it's okay to have that data be fresh, every 12 to 24 hours, because it's a lot easier on the engineering side. And the cost like analysis in terms of how much value you're delivering versus how much additional extra engineering effort there is to just meet one of the aspects of the data, one of the two pillars of data in terms of freshness. um, I mean, that's a whole industry of in itself. And the other one that I spoke around, transparency of the data. you know People want to know how accurate your data is. And what that means tactically is their ability to kind of like turn all the knobs, right?
Mm.
So they want data to be, presented to them at some level of granularity, but the ability to like have everything tied up it the most minute, detailed level, really impacts customers' ability to trust what you're showing them. And so that transparency around granularity and the freshness of the data are really the two powerful pillars for making data something to differentiate on.
And the value that you offer to your customers, it seems like the way it works, and I have seen it in many other services as well, makes the life easier over time, right? So the way you work by adding more data and adding more data and gaining more kind of like on both sides, right? So if I'm on Amazon, if I'm on LinkedIn, just based on my history on LinkedIn, my life gets easier because now I have more content. So people can go there. If I'm a new user versus I'm a user has been there for 2 years, probably it will help the audience to come in and on LinkedIn see more and educate them more about the company, about the person. So that's the value also of the data that the data gets there.
Yeah.
Do you see that also as a kind of great value for the service that people who have used it can better use it and easier use it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on the third pillar that I didn't mention, and that's how you receive the data,
Mhm.
right? It's easy enough for all of us to like build some beautiful dashboard and expect our users to, go in and look at the data and turn all the knobs. But in SaaS, classically, you have a variety of, stakeholders at the customer level that are not the same user, right? You have maybe the operator who is in there, loves the dashboards. But then you have the operators like boss or maybe like the CFO, and they don't even want to log into your product. They want a report emailed to them or a distribution list, and they want it in a very specific format, right? Like, it's obviously a file format of .csv or whatever, but then exactly how the columns are structured, they want to be able to ingest your data directly into their process workflows and processes and answer whatever question is on their mind, right? And like, we see it a lot, like at Wonolo, like the operators want to know, how we're doing what we call like fill rate. Like if we asked for 100 people yesterday, how many did we get? 97 would be 97%. But then also the bosses want to know, it's like, okay, well, last week, how many did we ask and how well did we do? And what are some of the quality metrics that come out of it? And they want it in a very digestible format emailed to them. So they don't even have to look to us. So that third pillar of like kind of like data ingestion for your customer is really what separates the Amazons from, the companies you never heard about.
Yep, exactly. Um, how do you feel on the product side? I want to now, wear your hat as a kind of product, head of product and VP of product in the company. And I want to know from your perspective, because I have heard a lot of different uh, varieties of how the product can work with the company. Like for example, in some cases product is very much close to engineering. In some cases product is very close to the marketing side, to the sales side. And the reality is on the product side you have to work with every piece of the business, not just one. And probably I guess that with kind of resources that every company has, at the end it's limited. uh, you cannot make everyone happy, because not every party can come to you and ask and you deliver everything to everyone. And you have to make some decisions. How do you see from product standpoint that the way you are working with them, uh, you can actually have that balance between the investment on the product capabilities that you do and the return on investment
Yeah.
from that product perspective? Have you been able to somehow, you know, picture it for people to see it, that this is, we are adding to the product investment we made, and this is the kind of returning on this investment?
Awesome. It's a great question, Armand. I think like some of the answer is totally dependent on the size of your product org,
Mhm.
right? So at Wonolo, we're in the process of scaling, doubling headcount. Um, and so we're finally at a place as a Series D company
Mhm.
where we can say that, you know, each tech team, as we actually call them, is dedicated to a handful of users.
Mhm.
And those end users, while some of them are obviously customers or like workers, we also have end users internally. And so an end user internally might be the marketing team or the finance team,
Okay.
right? And they're the ones who have their own needs and their own problems.
Interesting.
And so what we try and do is endeavor that a tech team either only has one end user or at max two end users. And so by that structure, balancing our breadth throughout the organization is possible based on the scale we're at. Now, you could be at a smaller organization where maybe you only have like, four tech teams or three tech teams, and you can't even do that. Like, there's just so much to do.
Mhm.
But the saying that I like to is that all roads lead to product. And so eventually, the tech team and product have to get involved and figure out to deliver the thing that is the most impactful. And the simple, like, guiding light, at least at Wonolo and what I've learned over the years, is that we like to optimize for delivering as much value as quickly as possible for our end users. So who your end user changes, what the value is changes, but a simple value over cost, framework will consistently produce results and continue to deliver value over time. And that's what you want to do to win, right? If you deliver more value over time to your end users than your competitors, you'll win.
And what is this tech team is consist of? Is it the kind of complete stack of developers, QA, product kind of managers, or it's just the how do you structure these tech teams that are very much, as I understand, end result driven and business driven? Kind of their
Yeah.
objective is to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great question. So there's a lot of research on like feature teams versus like product teams.
Hmm.
But I think the problem with the term product team is that it kind of makes the PM seem like they're the end all be all, and it's really a flat
Hmm.
organizational structure. And so at least Wonolo, we've broken it up so that the tech organization is built by two functions: engineering and product. And then within product, we have product managers, product designers, product analysts, and user experience research, which is, they're all trying to be as close as possible to the customer and solve their problems. A tech team is an autonomous team of product and engineering that tries to solve problems for an end user from a metric based approach. And so we like to focus on outcomes over outputs.
Hmm.
And so one of the things I tell my product managers is I do not care about how many features you ship. I care about what metrics you move. I understand that they will have to probably ship features to move the metrics, but like a list of here's all these features I shipped without any corresponding results from a metric standpoint is not necessarily impactful. And that just goes back to kind of the philosophy around trying to help the business grow through product. If you don't focus on actually trying to grow business metrics, then you can end up with a bunch of stuff that doesn't really matter.
So that's very interesting, because essentially these product metrics, you don't want to have too many metrics. You don't want to have not enough metrics. So where do you draw the line to say, hey, I have enough metrics
Sure.
that it doesn't distract people, but it helps, but also it provides a very clear picture and helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think like here's where you get into distributed thinking and how that is a little bit different with from an agile team standpoint.
Mhm.
So each tech team, has one North Star metric that they are trying to move, and it is a business metric and it is an outcome like metric, like retention or the activation rate. And it's on the PMs to figure out all of the nitty gritty details that are needed to kind of like move that. And you start thinking about retention. What does that mean? Well, that means that somebody came back and did something. Okay, well, there's probably some leading indicators in an engagement standpoint around hitting a button or finalizing any other aspects of the product that you can look at ahead of time.
Mhm.
And so I tell my product managers to how do you get to move this North Star metric, this output metric, and it's on them to work with their teams and the other product analysts to indicate here are the engagement metrics that we should focus on ahead of time. And it's up to them to figure that out and tell a story. So I am not trying to understand all of the nitty gritty details, at my level about what moves the outcome metrics, so these North Star metrics. That's on the product managers themselves, but it gives the kind of like balance of granularity at the level that's needed versus the high level aspect that we're looking for at leadership to make sure that we're going in the right direction.
Okay, that's great. It's a yeah, it makes perfect sense. So then you get all of these North Stars, and then all of them relates to the top kind of goal that you have for the business. So you
Yeah,
essentially, and that, even that may help to understand how many of these tech teams you need. Because, for example, if then, it needs to match to the North Star or the main goals and business objectives that you mentioned. So that's
yeah,
how you decide that this is the number of tech teams that we need to establish in the company.
exactly. And I think the thing that's the most interesting is that no matter how complex your business is, the most successful you will ever be is if you can simplify it for everybody within the organization so that people, not just like the engineers and the product managers who live day to day all these metrics, has to be so simple that the support reps and the customer service, customer success folks, and the people who don't ever deal with with the tech teams, like maybe directly, can understand what the North Star metric is, hear it and be like, oh, I get it. I know what you're trying to do. And, most businesses can be broken down into just three like core like aspects, right? It's like acquiring customers, retaining, and then acquiring the customers, how many customers you have, and then how much money you make off the customers over time, right? So it might be like something like CAC, active users, and LTV, right? I mean, there's a variety of ways to break
Sure.
that down. But if those are your three metrics, then growth could be simply done by lowering CAC. Growth could be simply done by raising the number of active users, or growth could be done by growing your LTV, right? And so, how you take something like so simple and break it down in these complex businesses, particularly in the SaaS world,
Mhm.
becomes really impactful really fast.
Now, some of these metrics, let's say cost of customer acquisition, that is very important because essentially if you cannot lower that cost and increase the efficiency, it impacts directly your scalability. As a SaaS
Mm.
company, there is no way you can grow fast and you can scale if that cost cannot be, you know, uh, I would say manageable or can be
Right.
relatively speaking at a reasonable ratio. Now, have you seen any of those, for example, may kind of conflict with another major metric that you wanted to control because, for
Sure.
example, your customer satisfaction, or because it's because of the customer experience even during the sales process, and then you are really having these kind of, sometimes, all of them are great aspects, but sometimes it may impact each other in a way that, now what do you do with regard to that, right? So that's the
Oh,
phase of
totally.
the company in your perspective, that you may say, well, from phase A to phase B, that can change, or is from your perspective normally has been pretty obvious which one you should emphasize. What is your kind of take on
Yeah.
that?
So let me give you a tactical example. I'll continue to use Wonolo. We understand how much it costs to acquire and activate a worker, right? And we could make that process um, less. We could make it cost less. And one of the ways we can make it cost less is we could remove some of the steps in the funnel, the activation steps in the funnel that we have specifically inserted to try and get higher quality workers, right? And so we could easily lower our customer acquisition costs. But what we'd want to look at is what we call a contra metric, right? It's fine to say, hey, let's go lower our CAC or our worker activation costs in this aspect. It's like we need to make sure that the workers are at like a certain threshold of quality, or else all the customers who get the temp staff workers, they're going to say, I can't use Wonolo anymore. The workers aren't great. And so the two contra metrics we might look at there are the quality metrics that we have on the workers, and or the customer retention of the people who look at there, right? And so now this framework of just trying to lower, your worker activation costs, but we need to make sure that quality doesn't dip and that very specifically customers don't churn. You start to see all these parameters in place that make like doing something that you think might be easy actually like really hard, right? And that balance of you know opening up the funnel versus the impact on quality and negative and churn is something that we play with all the time.
Yeah, so it's really about optimization, and that's the art of product
Yeah,
management anyway, to really
yeah,
optimize it in the best way.
yeah. I mean, you look, we have dashboards that show all the steps in the funnel, and like if we have like a big drop in the funnel, the product team, we get together and we talk about it. We say, what are the theses, right? What do we think is going on here? Do we have a lot of data? Do we have quality insights? Do we have qualitative insights or quantitative insights that potentially impact our ability to, come up with a potential solution? And we might look at the funnel and there might be a huge step, and we might look at it and say, hey, like actually that step is where the worker has to agree to legal terms. And we don't have any good theses around how to change that, because like they have to check the box before they hit the accept button. and changing that has too much legal risk. So we're not going to focus on this big drop off in the funnel because we don't have any good theses on how to address it. But this other place in the funnel, like where workers take a picture, which is maybe like the second highest drop off, not the first. It's like, well, we asked the workers, hey, like, why didn't you finish taking a picture here? They said, oh, I wasn't ready. I was like, okay, now we're mapping qualitative insights with the quantitative aspect of seeing like the step in the funnel drop off and we asked ourselves like, hey, can we move this to later in the process when maybe the worker expects it and is ready and not have any negative impact to the overall quality and therefore, churn. And so those are the types of things that you have to go through as a product team and ask yourselves, like, not just where, but what, right? And if you have a strong thesis, then now you have something to build on and potentially go out and test.
I would like to kind of have the last question about maybe a book that you can introduce um, to our audience.
Sure,
And also, I would like to ask you to explain about the blog that you have. So I know that you are writing a blog, and probably there
sure.
is a good synergy between the audience that we have here and the blog post. So in not in
Uh,
a, so if you could, you know, explain that on that front as well, that would be great.
sure. I'll do the blog first.
Sure.
So I write a blog called On Product, um, Himelstein.substack.com. I'm sure the link will be in the comments or whatever. And I just write tactically around like some of the things that you need to do and invest in, to be better as a product manager. So I got things like how to product plan, how to write a PRD or product requirements document. How to A/B test. When should I A/B test? A lot of tactical advice. So definitely give it a follow. It's free, and it's just kind of like the thoughts of my 10 or 11 years of experience and the conversations we have while we're scaling Wonolo. On the book front, I recently finally read it, Trillion Dollar Coach. It is about Bill Campbell, the coach of Silicon Valley. Um, and one of the things that's most interesting about like Bill Campbell is, aside from being like the advisor to the Google co-founders and Steve Jobs and everybody you ever even like thought of like as a aspiring Silicon Valley like mogul. The thing that Bill Campbell like taught more so than ever was that teams are what are successful. And when we talk about like tech teams or a product team or even a leadership team, the ability to get more than the sum of its parts is one of the keys to success. And I definitely think you should take a look at a Trillion Dollar Coach. It's a great read, and I got fondness in my heart for Bill Campbell.
Perfect. Thank you again for your time, Matthew. It was great speaking with you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Armand.